The path of awakening is an art and one that takes us to our true identity, and one that began for me several years ago when I was led to a once in a lifetime course, The Art in Ancient Egypt. Then I spent a good 15 years or so with Mother Sedona and the Panther, who taught me the origin of the identity, where we come from, and how to protect it. I had also taken a lot of the different sciences, anatomy, biology, physiology, and this led me into my work with the anatomy of the soul and the soul DNA, which led me into my purpose as a dream archaeologist and intuitive medicine. And then I was shown how to put this information and protection into the oils.
Anything that is made for you, that is meant for your path and your identity, is protected, even when you face opposition. So, what happens when you go against your identity and your path, and you get into trends and following belief systems and groups and what you see online, is you are betraying your identity. You are betraying your individuality and your path. And Jesus is the teacher of identity. Jesus is the ruler of your heart, your identity, and your destiny. And one of the most common ways I have seen this, only one of many though, is the New Age to Christianity. Many, in every single case actually that I have ever seen in these testimonies and these stories, they betrayed their own path and their individual path and followed a trend or a group, but even more so, they started idolizing the practice and making their life revolve around it, and even began teaching this practice when, and it that wasn't a part of their path. They took it upon themselves to start doing this, and then they call it demonic. And that is because they have an attachment to it. And it's the same with a relationship or anything else in our life, that we start to have that belief and we revolve our life around. If it's a relationship and a person is meant to come into your life for a short period of time, and you begin to assume this role onto this person and make them a part of your life and make them commit to you and try to make it be in your life longer than it's meant to be or anything else, and and you want this commitment when it's not meant to be that, and then people will start calling that person demonic. And it's like you're trying to attach to something that was never meant to be that way, or if it was meant for you, it was only for a short period of time. It's like if you have a cold and God's like, take headache medicine, and then you start investing in just hoarding bottles of headache medicine, and then you start investing in the stocks, and then you start marketing it and then teaching people about it and then passing these bottles out. And God's like, you were only meant to take that for that week when you had a cold. That's it. You weren't meant to make it something that it's not. And what happens is, in these testimonies, and you still have that attachment, you can, and it's like jumping ship, and you're still clinging onto that attachment into that religion, then you are still able to be manipulated, because it's this attachment to something that makes you feel whole, or it's, increases your dopamine or your feel good, just like a relationship or any other addiction or anything like that. That is how you get off a path, when what Jesus is doing and teaches is to actually break these group patterns. You're not, your path and your identity is written on your heart in your Christed name. And this is what makes your map. It's quite literally like a geography map. And I talk about this in my upcoming self-defense course and in identity protection. You have your own map on your heart. It is not supposed to look like other people's map. So if you are following your true path, then you're definitely not going to fit into those groups. And that's why you never fit in to those groups. You cannot claim your individual path and your destiny if you are comparing your path to others. But also, if you are denying, if you're listening to what others are telling you to do, also, one example I can give of this is yoga for myself. So, 12 plus years ago, probably, when I was first led to yoga, and this was around the time I was in a very very dark place in my life. I had been suffering with chronic pain since I can remember. This was around the time I was also diagnosed with MS. And I addiction from pain my whole life. I had severe sciatica problems and issues with my hips and flare-ups in my entire life. I had hormonal imbalances around this time and very severe ones for a couple of years. And then I also had earaches. So when I was led to yoga in this time, I was led by God, was in a time where I couldn't have even avoided it. It met me on my path. And the specific yoga and the specific teacher, I am so grateful that she listened to her calling and her purpose, because the yoga that I did for this 3 months absolutely changed my life. I had a huge turnaround in this period of time. I cannot even tell you how much this helped me. My hormones balanced out, my earaches went away, and I had way less back pain. So healing MS, this took quite a few years in its entirety. So that's not what changed my life in MS itself, but even the structure that I was able to build within and tone my body within, I cannot tell you how much it helped me, seriously. But had I taken it upon myself to just start teaching yoga and becoming obsessed with it because it worked for me, and just trying to push it on to other people, you know, or I didn't listen. When we take things upon ourselves and not because we need it, not because we're led to, this is when we come across false teachers. And this is why people that are not doing that in their purpose are already being misled. So if you're doing it because you're misleading yourself, you're going to match up with teachers who are misled, if that makes any sense. You're not going to be matched up with a teacher that is fully in their purpose if you're not supposed to be there, type of thing, right? So I'm very grateful for that period of time in my life, but I didn't take it upon myself to continue to practice it when I wasn't called to it. And that's what we really want to understand when it comes to anything that we are engaging in. If it's a person in a relationship that we're trying to force into our life and make it work because it makes us feel good or because we think that's what's happening. Sure, I felt better after doing yoga, but I wasn't like addicted to it. And that's the really big thing, is it comes down to addiction and attachments of the womb. That is all what everything comes down to, is when we're seeking something. When we're looking for love, when we're looking to feel good, when we're looking for things, that grants the opportunity for something that is in disguise to come into our life and pretend to be that for us. And that is how we can easily be misled. So there are a lot of ways we can betray ourselves. Some are not doing it intentionally, but to blame that person or that practice or anything outside of us, to blame them for being demonic, you have authority. This doesn't mean if you're in your purpose and your destiny, you won't face opposition in dark entities and demonic entities, I should say, but you have authority over them. You are quite literally led to that person or to that practice or to that location because you have authority over that. So, if you're trying to build a business or you're trying to make a relationship and you face opposition, you have authority over it if it is part of your soul map and your identity and your purpose. So, if there are people that are going around and saying that yoga, the entire practice of yoga, is demonic and it's rooted in evil, well, the not necessarily. This is why people can have, you can date the same person or be with the same person and have two different experiences, because what that person is meant to get from that person and what you are meant to get from that person are two different things. So if we're going to go around and call everything demonic that didn't work for us or that person, now, sometimes, yes, they may have demonic entities working through them. That teacher might have that. That relationship might have that. The roots of a business can have that, but you will be led to it to fight that if it is in your purpose. you're not going to be led to that with demonic entities if it is meant for you to have in your life. Do you understand that? I didn't have to fight or have any problems with yoga, and I didn't meet any gods or goddesses or anything like that because that's not who or what I was led to. Just because it makes sense to us or because we agree with it or because we like it doesn't mean that it is right. It doesn't mean that it's the truth, and it doesn't mean that it's meant for us. Just because you like somebody doesn't mean that they're meant for you. Just because you have an insane attraction in chemistry and it appears to be compatible doesn't necessarily mean they are meant for you. And it goes the same with everything else that we are watching online. Just because we agree with something doesn't mean that it's the truth. And that can be for better or for worse. So, yes, Jesus does teach that we are all whole in one and connected in truth and in Christ, but you still have your own individual path and identity and name that you are meant to follow. So if you betray yourself because everyone else told you it was bad or wrong, it's yes, you are betraying your destiny and God in a sense because God is looking to experience that through you. And everything that we face and experience is not always going to be rainbows and butterflies. We meet these people to also teach us things about ourselves as well. It's not, we learn more when we do have opposition about ourselves. We learn more about ourselves when there is opposition in a sense at times. But when it comes down to it, is that practice, is that person, is that relationship, is that business bringing you closer to your truth and identity, your Christed name, and to God? Is it bringing you closer to God? Is that business that you're called to do bringing others closer to their truth also? And that's what it really comes down to. So we don't want to judge what other people are doing because you don't agree with it or because a whole group did it, because they were probably might have all had that attachment in the background. In that time that I practiced yoga, it did bring me closer to my truth, to myself, and to God. It helped relieve that pain in that time period. But if I took it upon myself to do yoga 5 years later when I wasn't called to, that's the other thing is God knows the cycles. Everything works in cycles. The different organs in our body and everything else, not to mention our own life cycles. God knows when something is meant for us to do. And that's why we want to do it in that time period that we're called to do it because it's going to work in that time period. And the other part of that is sometimes then people try to override that. And because they figured it out logically, they'll say, oh, well, now I figured it all out. Once they overcame that pattern or that lesson, they'll say now they get into the logical and science of it and they say now I can figure it out without the spiritual or the emotions. They'll say, for an example, I heard a lot of at one point, you know what, we don't need forgiveness because this and that, and we're getting into this metaphysical science part of it, but I'm like, but you actually did have to go through that. That it's not only science and or only nature and spirituality, it's the both of them together. So you had to go through that because that is how our soul develops. That is how our soul is formed and changed. You did have to go through that to learn that level of forgiveness, for example. So that's only one example, but these experiences and these lessons that we have are shaping our soul in ways that only God can see why we have to go through them. But this really is basically a reminder that your own individual path is not going to look like others. And if you're trying to fit it into where other people agree with you or because you agree with other people, then that might not even be the path anyways. Because if you are in your purpose, you are meant to break down those systems that are not supporting the truth. And the truth is going to bring you closer to your own, to God within you.